the video games to play me. No. Who made who? Who made you?
You like that band, Act Dick? Act Dick? Act/Dick? They also have a song about balls to the wall or something. You like that Act Dick band? You can observe live, real time as I perfect my Act Dick impersonation. What's that guy's name? I can't stand AC/DC. I don't know that dude's name. But he's balls to the wall, bro. So this video, we had such a tremendous response. The last car talk. D-bag in his car. D-bag in his car alert. D-bag in his car alert. Popping off. Popping off in my car like a douchebag in Jersey. So this is the last couple months of non-stop vindication. Nothing but vindication this last couple months. Maybe that's why so many of these haters has just come out of the woodwork going buck wild crazy. Because basically everything that I've talked about and people have gotten so mad about over the last 10, 12 years, 13, 14, it's adding up. I don't even know how many years it's been. But it's just so monumental, the nonstop vindication. And does anybody apologize? No. Does anybody say, I'm sorry that I called you a lunatic fringe for so many years? No. That's okay. It's okay. Y'all know I was right. So this week's vindications, 2 months vindications. First of all, Jeff Stein. What does that vindicate? Well, that vindicates the 2 books I wrote. Hello, I wrote 2 books about cults, sex cults, blah, blah, blah. Got called crazy for a long time for that. I'm not crazy, bro. I read a lot of books. I know what I'm talking about. But yeah, so Jeff Stein, that vindicates my 2 books and all the stuff I talked about for a long time. But we also want to talk about the other vindications in the last couple months. So NPR put out a pretty in-depth story going into detail about the MKUltra experiments, the different doctors. Now, this was stuff that was already well known to people in the conspiracy world. People that have been researching this and who had even read, a few books on the topic already knew about this stuff for a long time. And it was very easy to verify. But the reason this is relevant is because they, for the first time, have talked about the doctors in detail and talked about how, turns out they were doing all kinds of stuff that was even crazier. They were actually trying to create altars, and they were electroshocking people and all this stuff. That was all already in congressional testimony, so had nothing to do with conspiracy theories. So that was a big vindication, and you can look up the NPR report. And then as a result of that, all these other mainstream media outlets, let's talk about you and Cameron now, and they're going into in-depth, basically vindicating stuff that John Marks wrote back in the late 70s. With CIA and the Manchurian Candidate book. We've covered that years ago on Jay's Analysis. The Walter Boert book, we did that, 7-8 months ago. So that was a big, legit vindication. Geoengineering. We've talked about geoengineering for a long time. It's a big part of my second book because many years ago, when I first heard about this, I thought it sounded kooky. A long time ago, back in 2004. And I thought, that's a little crazy, but maybe, right? So I went to a lot of university websites, and I started looking at the ELF, VLF, Stanford Research, right? They have a lot on this stuff. And I found a significant amount of material that dealt with the atmospheric techniques that they did in terms of the ionosphere for heating up the atmosphere. And then I learned about cloud seeding and all these different projects that had gone on for many years. So it was pretty obvious, especially given all of the papers at the Stanford ELF website, ELF, right? And so, but there were still people, especially certain alternative media clowns, who would attack me extensively for talking about this even being real at all. Easy to verify, but this guy, I think, I'm not going to name him, but I've always thought that guy was a troll. But a lot of trolls, they just want your attention. They want to suck your energy away. Energy vampire trolls. The troll hole, you got to pay the troll toll. Like Danny DeVito says. Anyway, so we were right about that, and you can get Esoteric Hollywood too for my whole section on how Hollywood kind of prepared us for and seeded us with the ideas of geoengineering and all this stuff. And what's obvious is that, especially given the recent Forbes magazine, the Smithsonian, Guardian, all these publications had been mentioning it for many years. I actually found Royal Society papers that talked about it pretty extensively many years ago. So that's what I cited in my book. Again, I have a very extensive essay on that. And that essay was one of the first mega viral pieces at Jay's Analysis a long time ago, many years ago, 6-7 years ago. Maybe 5 years ago, I wrote a really in-depth piece on that, and it kind of went internet mega viral. And it was like one of the top shared sites on different trackers for maybe 2 days straight. But even still, that's like a fringe idea, right? Most people have no idea whether that's real. But there's even ads you can actually get jobs for helping to modify the weather, just as like a normie civilian now. Regardless, big vindication. Doesn't mean that I know everything about what's going on with the geoengineering. Other events in the last few months, papers have come out about big events. Those papers vindicated things. You can figure out what I mean. Things that we talked about for many years in my realm. Got made fun of, got called retardo for many years over that. But I had read like 5 books on this event in the mid-2000s. And it was obvious to me that, although I don't know every detail of what went down and all that, it was obvious that we were not being told the truth, right? And this is another trick that people do where you'll figure out kind of the problems and you're not buying the mainstream story, and then you start talking about it, and what they'll do is be like, oh, you don't know every single possible infinitesimal connection and relation, and you can't give me a perfect 1,000-page explanation of this event, then you're a crazy person. Nobody can do that. When detectives get a hunch, or when they have a theory, that's why we have courts, right? Because it's not possible to know every possible relation and every possible connection in some large-scale event, right? So that's just nonsense. But what's interesting is that all of these people, and I can remember them specifically, who over the years were so defiant, so rude, so quantum level haters, they're all wrong. They're all wrong about all that stuff. And we've also seen a big vindication coming. Well, actually, we've seen 2. So Catholic News and World Report published an article that I shared on Twitter. You can go check that out, where we have a somewhat well-known Catholic apologist admitting, oh, guess what? Looks like Vatican I, these universal claims that were laid down at Vatican I actually weren't the case in the first millennium. Now, I wouldn't get too giddy about this, because a lot of the trads are going to see that, and eventually obviously they're going to keep doing the mental gymnastics, like Jim Cotta. You ever seen the movie Jim Cotta? Go watch Jim Cotta to understand the trad mental gymnastics that go on. I know, because I used to do it. But Gymkata, one of the worst movies of all time. I should cover Gymkata, by the way. Olympic athletes hired to be CIA assassins. Really dumb movie. Probably some truth to that. Who knows, right? I mean, does anything sound crazy anymore? You can't even do satire anymore because everything that's real is more satire than satire. So, but the Catholic News and World Report dialogue paper talks about how, it's time to admit that there was no universal jurisdiction in the Vatican I sense in the first millennium of the Church. Well, yeah, we know that. We've been saying that as Orthodox for a long time. But I did have somebody make a good point that, well, I wouldn't get too giddy on this because really this is just to help seduce the Orthodox into jumping into bed with Francis. By the way, don't jump into bed with Francis. But yeah, that's how this will be spun, even though it's a pretty good admission from, somebody who's a fairly well-known apologist. And then on top of that, though, what's even more important is the Amazon Synod. So I was reading through the document. I read the Vatican preparatory Amazon Synod document. All the trads are doing their rosaries, trying to, please don't let this happen. Well, guess what? There already was an Amazon Synod. It was called Vatican II, and it already laid down all the same seeds and principles for what's now the later flowering. Because you see, positions become more and more consistent with themselves over time. This is called epistemological self-consistency, right? You become more and more consistent with your governing presuppositions over time. Now, it may take a long time, but eventually that's what happens. But the Amazon Synod, it reads like AOC. Like AOC and Francis got together after a tryst. Well, actually, it wouldn't be after a tryst because I don't think those two, I don't know that Frank would be into the ghetto J-Lo, right? He'd probably be more into the ghetto Lil Jon than the ghetto J-Lo, right? I don't know. We don't know orientations in the Vatican. Well, maybe we do. We won't go there. So, but the Vatican Synod, Amazon Synod is set to essentially give the A-OK to animism, spiritism, all kinds of bizarre Amazonian practices, because of course this is part of the aggiornamento of the whole ethos of the post-Vatican II world. But actually, as we know from going all the way back to the Renaissance, hermeticism, that's the real origin of all the Vatican II stuff. The real origin of ecumenism. Yeah, I mean, in the modern world, it comes out of the funding from the Rockefellers and all that in the late, early 20th century. That's all well documented in Collier and Horowitz. But I'm speaking of the real hermetic roots of ecumenism, and that goes back to the Renaissance. And that's very easy to document. It's totally true. Occult Renaissance Church of Rome talks about that pretty extensively. It documents it very well. And it shows that the whole idea of the medieval synthesis, which is different from the Orthodox view, right? I mean, St. Photius the Great was a learned scholar. He was one of the most learned men of his day. Many of the Byzantines were great theologians, philosophers, and scholars. Nothing wrong with scholarships. But the point is that the idea of the hermetic synthesis between Christianity and Neoplatonism and this kind of stuff is not possible. All the great apologists, St. Gregory of Nyssa against Eunomius, all the way up into the anti-Nestorian works, all the way up into St. Maximus against the Monothelites and the Monenergists. This is against Hellenic dialectics, right? Well, it's well documented, well known. Again, read Byzantine Christ by Bathrellos. You'll get that very clearly. And the point being is that we're seeing, again, centuries and centuries of outworking of Roman Catholic errors. That's the point here. This is not post-Vatican II liberalism, right? The way the trads all think it. That mythology's long been exploded, bruh. You need to get with the program. You're way out of touch. It goes back to the Renaissance, Hermeticism, and ultimately goes back to the Hermeticism of the filioque and absolute divine simplicity. The idea that, oh, I share the same generic idea of God with every religion out there, like the Buddhist and the Muslim and the Hindu and the Satanist and the Jehovah's Witness can all join hands in proving a one true first cause. Anyway, but this is a great godsend, because it's almost like every time the intense opposition comes, which, man, there's been so many trolls and haters in the last 2 months, it's crazy. But in the midst, the jewels in the midst of this 2 months of trolls and haters and just total quantum tard level stuff has been God sent gifts of total vindication on all of these points across the board. It's like the biggest stories out there in these different spheres of life are nothing but vindications of the stuff that we've been talking about. And it goes to show that I've been right for a long time. And, you know, it's an occult symbol, right? The thumbs up, that's a long-standing occult symbol where I'm signifying to my other occult members out there the thumbs up. This is Jay Dyer from Jay's Analysis. Hope you enjoyed this douchebag in a car video. Popping off. You're popping off. This, by the way, this is not a satanic symbol, dum-dums. This is sign language for I love you. Oh. Did you not know that signs and symbols are determined by their context and their intention? No, you didn't know that. They're not universal. They're not synonymous amongst all contexts. Subscribe below, click the clickies, click the clickety-clacks, and thank you for following Jay's Analysis. Thank you that we pruned 100 evangelical boomers in the last week. That's okay. Glad to have pruned them, because it's getting real. It's getting real, y'all. Stuff is getting so crazy. It's like every day there's a new major vindication. Anyway, I'll talk to you soon. Thank you for support, and God bless.